Hello and welcome to OETC and Microsoft's M365 Onboarding webinar series. I'm Stephen Yamada with OETC's communications team. Today's session will cover Microsoft Teams and will be presented by Eric Orman, technical specialist on the USA education team at Microsoft. This session is being recorded and will be sent out early next week. I'd also like to take a quick moment to highlight OETC's renewals team, some of whom are on today's webinar. If you have any licensing questions, you can reach out to help@oetc.org and someone from the team will be happy to assist. With that, Eric, I'll hand it over to you.
Hey, thank you very much. Good morning. I think everyone is morning or afternoon or evening, kind of depending if you're watching it recorded. I'm Eric Orman. I'm a senior technical specialist on the U.S. education team. I primarily cover California and Hawaii, been also backfilling up in the Northwest, and so was asked to come and present on Teams, which happens to be one of the most popular topics of the day. And so what I plan to cover today is very focused on the Teams administrator. So what the Teams admin will go through the Teams administrative portal. How do I set up Teams? How do I kind of an overview of the portal, all the policies, how to understanding guest access and external access, how to do call quality analysis, and various other kind of tips and tricks that I have a lot of my customers have stumbled into and kind of roadblocks to avoid. So that's kind of my general orientation today. I also cover Teams calling. That's another kind of top feature that's been kind of popping quite a bit lately. So we've got a full hour for this, so I'm going to go kind of fast. And I kind of talk a little bit fast, but use the chat. We will at the end, of course, have Q&A, and I'll be able to, unmute your microphones and ask questions and I'll stay on as long as you guys have questions. So I'll be able to answer all of those. And those that are watching this recorded, feel free to proxy your questions up, and I can somebody will coordinate with you to help get those questions answered that you have. So without further ado, I want to just jump right in and let me share my screen. And kind of the first place that I want to just initially talk about is really about licensing of Teams, because there's some confusion around that. So let's just clear that out. If you are an education organization, you get Teams for free. So that comes as part of your Office 365 A1. And so this is a simple table that goes over the various capabilities of Teams in terms of the licensing pack. So the free column, Office 365 A1, the ability to create meetings, join meetings, chat, collaborate, do all of that. You get all of that for free for all of the users of your organization. That's teachers, faculty, staff, students. You get Teams for free as part of your Office 365 A1. So that covers that. The next kind of bundle is included with Office 365 A3 is you get two things really, live events capability and some initial data loss prevention for files. And so you could set retention settings and those particular pieces of those. So, do you need, A3? Do you need live events? Do you need data loss prevention? Live events quite simply is this meeting that we're having right now is a normal Teams meeting. You can have up to 300 people in this type of meeting. A live event allows up to 10,000 people to join the meeting. It's more of a webinar where you can have 10 presenters and it's streamed to up to 10,000 people, and they can watch it on just from a browser or the Teams client. And so think of it as a live stream. Really great for graduations, or most frequently in education, it's used for board meetings that we have. In higher education, of course, those are different use cases up there, but typically that's what we see in kind of the K-12 is board meetings is what live events is used for. And then the top level tier, Office 365 A5, is really about adding telephony, so phone system license to that, in addition to some additional capabilities around information barriers, which really allows the segmentation between students and teachers. Like students can't, teachers, and there's some advanced capability, and you get the full DLP and data loss prevention capabilities along with that. So the one feature set that we do see customers purchase is they'll have Office 365 A1. They might not need A3, but they'll purchase audio conferencing. That's included in A5, but they'll purchase it a la carte for A1. And what audio conferencing provides is, imagine this meeting that we're in right now. Somebody could, from their cell phone or any landline phone or anything, they could use a PSTN to dial into the meeting. So it gives them PSTN dial-in capabilities. So audio conferencing is typically the #1 licensing pack that people purchase on top of A1 if they don't go full A3 or A5. There's a lot of licensing. So some of you may have heard of Office 365 licensing, but there's also M365 licensing. M365 just includes more features and capabilities across the board for Microsoft products, like Azure Active Directory Premium and Intune for device management is kind of some examples. So if you have Office 365 A3, that's included in M365 A3. And Office 365 A5 is included with M365 A5. So M365 A3 and A5, those are kind of super bundles. Think of them, they include everything within that. So if you have M365 A5, you have every feature product of Microsoft available to you. So that's the Big Mac of licensing packs out there. So that's kind of key. Just really takeaways from this is you have Teams, it's for free, comes with Office 365 A1. Probably consider getting audio conferencing so that if you have meetings, people can dial into those meetings. And then you could look at A3 or A5 as kind of additional capabilities around data loss prevention or phone systems. And I'm going to get into calling, the telephony part, towards the end of this meeting, this webinar. So I'm going to kind of move on, and I'm going to spend, I don't have a lot of slides because I like to actually show you the portal and walk and talk through those particular pieces, because again, like I said, this session is focused on the IT administrator. So the person that's going to be configuring Teams and setting it up and doing the administration from that. So again, as we go through this, please feel free to use the chat. And at the end, we'll have ability to unmute your microphone and ask some verbal questions. So the first place that I want to start, now that we have licensing down, the first place I want to start is really around the M365 portal. So this is the top level portal for we call it a tenant for your Microsoft account. So I just call it, it's admin.microsoft.com. A couple of weeks ago, I did an overview of this portal and kind of walking through everything. It was a general tour of this, so I would recommend to watch that. I'm not going to get into the smaller details of that, but really from a Teams point of view, in here, I'm not really big, licenses for licenses for users, but if you click on users and active users, it's going to show you all of your available users that you have. You could create users in here if you want to. There's quite a few different ways of creating users. You could synchronize users from your on-premise Active Directory using Azure AD Connect. Those will create users in M365, and then you just need to simply assign a license to a user for that. And so if I want to assign a particular license to a user, I can come down here, I can click on, bad example. Here, we'll just call, Pat Nick. Here we go. This is the one that I wanted to. So it pulls up the blade. I can go simply to licenses. And here's my Office 365 A1 license in here. If I expand down in the bottom right-hand corner, it shows me all of the services that I get along with that. And there's 25 services within there. So of course, with A1, you get Exchange, you get various other planner, teams, so enabling teams in here. The reason why I'm going to show this also is if I assign this, see how it says Office 365 A1 students? Well, there's also Office 365 A1 for faculty. So faculty and students. This is really important for people when they first start using Teams. When you assign a faculty license to somebody, Teams is already enabled for that user. You just need to assign the license. But if you assign, let's say this Pat Nick, a student license, there's one additional step that you need to make. It's a first time step that you need to make. And so you have to enable students' ability to use Teams. And so this is the number one thing that trips up people, because they'll say, hey, I assigned all, my students' licenses, and still when they log to Teams, the Teams client, it says you don't have the ability to use Teams. So I'm going to show you what this first step is. So on this left-hand side, if you come down to settings, did you go to org settings? And so in here, there's a whole lot of settings, of course. But if I scroll down, you go to Microsoft Teams in here, this checkbox will be unchecked. That's actually how it will look, is only the faculty and staff are enabled by default. You'll need to come in here and put a checkbox next to student. And then of course, hit save. That enables anybody with the student license to use Teams. So it's a global setting across the board. Think of it as a master switch. So now that you assign those student licenses, all the students are allowed to use Teams. So just make sure that you come out here and set that and make sure it's checked. That's kind of the number one reason that people hit, number one issue that people hit with students when they have the license assigned, they try to log into the Teams client and they get a message they're not. It's because of this setting here. So again, in the portal, go to settings, go to org settings, find Microsoft Teams, come over here and select education and student, make sure both of these are checked. I'm going to go over guest access later on. So that's kind of the big thing with that in terms of setting Teams up from a pretty high level. So if I scroll down in the bottom left-hand corner is where all the various administrative portals are. And so, there's endpoint manager for Intune, Azure Active Directory. Of course, that's where all your identity, user identities are. Exchange, email, SharePoint makes sense. Teams. So I'm going to click on Teams, and that's going to launch the Teams administrative portal. So in here, this is the Teams admin portal. So I'm going to make this a little bit bigger so it's kind of easier to see for everybody. The first place that I actually like to go in all of this, well, let me give you an overview. So on the left-hand side, it's got all these various nodes, Teams. So those are Teams, I'll cover that. Users and meetings and messaging policies and Teams apps, analytics and reports, org-wide settings, planning, legacy portal, call quality dashboard. So the first place that I always like to go is after you enable Teams, what's really important are the policies that the users get. So if you were to try to find all of the policies over here on the left-hand side, it's pretty difficult to find out, what are all the policies and where are they at. They're kind of somewhat logically grouped, like meeting policies would be in the meetings node. I mean, that makes sense, but some of the other ones aren't. And so the first place I like to go is I go to users, and let's go take a look at, so there's user here. I'll click on him, and this goes into his profile and kind of shows various data about them. There's this tab in here called policies right here in the middle of the screen. So if I click on that, that's going to show me all of their policies that they have. And so there's 12 policies that a particular user has. Well, going back, you wouldn't know that trying to find it on this left-hand side. So I always like to start with the user. Now that you know that there's 12 policies, you need to define what those policies are. And so let's dive into those. So this one I was tinkering around with this. So I assigned this test policy to him. This one here under messaging policies is the global. So there's a global policy that everyone gets. And in fact, I'm going to say this multiple times. Anytime you add a new user to Teams, they're always going to get the global policy. we encourage you to make the global policy the most restrictive. So think of it as the student policy. There's typically only two policies actually one policy that you'll need to create. So the global policy, make that the student policy, and then we're going to create a teachers, faculty, and staff policy. So you only have to work with two policies on that. So I encourage people not to have the global policy and then a student policy and then a teachers, faculty, and staff, because then you got to manage more. At the end of the day, just make the global, which is the default, the most restrictive. And then if you have teachers, staff, you assign them the other one. I said that now, but I'm going to show you what that is, and then I'm going to repeat exactly what I just said. So let's look at what some of these policies are. So meeting policies, let's dive in and look at this. So in this meetings policy is everything about meetings within Teams. So like we're in a meeting right now, so it's various information about this. So do the allow meet now in channels. I'm not going to go over all of these. I have a general expectation that you have a understanding of Teams. And so again, this is really focused on IT administrators of how do I find the settings? How do I assign the settings? How do I configure them? So here's all the various settings that you have for meetings. Allow meet now in channels, allow transcription, allow cloud recording. So that's around, hey, do I want my recordings to be stored in the cloud? Or you could actually turn that off, which prevents people from recording. Allowing participants to request control. You have all of these PowerPoint sharing, all these various settings in here. These ones down at the bottom are really popular ones that we have. Allow chat meetings. So if this one was set to disabled, so the user that has this policy, like imagine in this meeting, they wouldn't be allowed to have the chat capability to ask questions. So because it's disabled. If we wanted to allow them to chat in meetings, it would be set to enabled. So that's a good example of that. Just looking at these, they have little eyes that you could hover over, and it briefly gives you, a little blurb about what's going on. But Teams has done a really great job, so it gives you an explanation of, participants and guests. There's this Learn More button over here, and this opens up a web page where you could learn more, and it totally goes over all of the settings that those have, what they do, how they behave. This is the technical documentation. So what I really love about Teams is they've provided links directly to the documentation. So you don't have to go and try to find the documentation. It's like, here are the settings. I want to know more about this. So you click on the Learn More, it launches it, and there's where you can learn more about each of those particular settings. And so this is a great way as you're going through to, well, I don't really know. Here's where you can find more information about those settings. And so they have it kind of scattered throughout for each of these. So learn more here, learn more up here for audio and video. So this is what the setting we have. Just going back, whoops, wait for this to load. So messaging, so that was meetings, messaging. Let's look at what the org-wide settings are here. The most popular one is chat. Frequently in majority, K-12 schools will disable chat for students. They just don't have the kind of digital citizenry that they, ability to control themselves with just native chat. And so a lot of organizations, K-12, will just disable chat for students and only allow chat in a actual meeting or a Teams channel. That's about it. And there's other controls in here around chatting. So that's kind of in general for that. So going back, and again, there's all of these settings. So as you guys look at this, it's like, whoa, that's kind of overwhelming. Well, what settings should we have? And so that's a good example. So policy are a great way of figuring out what Microsoft's recommended settings are. And so we have some templates in here. You can assign so let's take a look at this. So education teacher. So this is a great one. So they have a policy package where you could assign this to a particular user. It'll assign a meeting policy, or a messaging, a meeting, an app setup, and calling, and a live events policy. And so if you want to know what Microsoft recommends for a an education teacher, here's what all the settings are for those. So policy packages, you can assign those policies. I don't like assigning policy packages. I'll just say that flat out. I like to create my own custom policy. I'm going to show you how to do that. And what I like about the policy packages is I use them as a guideline. That's it. I use them as a guideline for creating not creating, but what my student, the default policy should be, and what my teachers, faculty, and staff. So it's a great way of like, okay, well, Microsoft did a lot of work looking at what a teacher should have as their meeting policies for their messaging policies, and you could use these as guidelines. And then same for, as you go through here, education, primary teacher, school with remote learning. Actually, let's look at student. So again, they have these, so you can look at messaging policy, and in this example that they encourage you to disable chat. Again, it goes to the reason of, 5th graders, 6th graders, or 7th graders really you don't have that capability to be control their behavior with chat. And so they'll disable chat because they want chat to all happen within a team that has adult supervision on there, the teacher supervision. But if we were looking at the teacher, of course, the teachers have the capability within here. Here's the teacher one. And if we go to messaging, of course, they have chat enabled because teachers can use chat, communicate with other teachers or school administrators and such. So I like, again, policy packages are a great way of figuring out your baselines for what you should have. Let's go and create a policy. So I'm going to come back to users. So I use Bill over here. I go to policies. So this is a great way to look at individual ones. If I want to, let's just go find the meeting policy. So on the left-hand side, I know that meeting policies are over here. So if I click on that, it's going to show me all of the meeting policies. And if I want to create one, it's as simple as just clicking the add button, and then let's name it. We'll call it TFS OETC, TFS for teachers, faculty, and staff. I always like to use that acronym for that. And so here you can tweak various settings. Just for the sake of this meeting, I'm just going to leave them all enabled. I'm going to scroll down to the very bottom. I'm going to click save. So there we go. I've got my teachers, faculty, and staff policy for meetings. So in here, where's it at? It's right here on the top. Now, if I want to assign this, I could do it individually. So if I wanted to go and assign that, I could go back to users. I could go find that person, Bill Pete. I come up here to policies. And if I wanted to assign the meeting policy, I could just click edit, come over here to meeting policy on the far right-hand side and look down for it. And there it is, TFS OETC, and simply select apply. And that'll apply that policy that we had individually to that particular user. We'll let this kind of spin for a second. Probably just need to refresh the page. So it shows it. There we go. Now it's assigned, and it says direct because it was a direct assignment to that. Now imagine, you don't really need to imagine, but you have hundreds, if not thousands of students and teachers. And so doing this one individually, that doesn't scale to meet your needs. So the easiest way to assign a policy to a group of people is, let's go back to the meeting ones as our example. So that we created that TFS one. If I come here to group policy assignment, I'm just going to click add a group. I'm going to search for a group. Let's see what we got. I already used that one. All workshop. Let's say that one, or like all staff. That's a bad one. All users. I used my other. I think I was tinkering around. Let's say all workshop. We'll just say add. Now I could select the policy name, and I could say TFS OTC. So now you're wondering, well, where did you get that group, Eric? Like, where is these? You had that picker up here. Where was it pulling all of those groups? Well, those groups are your groups that are in Azure Active Directory. So you can create a group. You can have groups that are synchronized. So all these groups over here, I'm going to quickly go over. So I'm back at the portal. If I go to Azure Active Directory, And if I come to Azure Active Directory here and I go into groups, see here's all my groups. You can use a group that was synchronized from on-premise to Azure AD. We call that, it's a synchronized group or a Windows Server AD on the far right-hand side. You could create a group here. So if you wanted to, you can create a group. It could be a static group or a dynamic group. I covered that in my other webinar of how to create groups and do licensing assignment. But at the end of the day, you have a group of users you have your teachers, faculty, and staff. You probably already have that group on-prem. It's been synchronized up. You can reuse that when you're doing the assignment on this. So the example that I had, which one did I pick? What did I say? All staff, or did I say all staff chat? I'll just pick that one. So imagine that's all your staff. Now you can assign policy to a distribution group. We don't matter what group. It could be a distribution group. It could be an M365 group. It could be a synchronized group. It could be an Azure AD group. They don't care. It's just a group. If it's in this group here in Azure AD, you can pick it and assign a policy for those users that are in there. So simply just assign the policy, TFS. It's going to be in the all staff chat. I click apply, and it's going to automatically apply that to any and all users that are in the all staff chat group. So that's a great way of doing a bulk assignment of a policy to individual users. So I would recommend to do that. So create a policy for all of your teachers, faculty, and staff. So we'll go back to Bill Pete. We'll go to policies. Create a policy for teachers, faculty, and staff for your organization. For these, students get the global because you don't have to manage it. So any of your students, they're always going to be in the global, and make that your most restrictive policies. So disabling chat, allow meet now in meetings, and quite a few of those others. And then create a teachers, faculty, and staff and assign that to teachers, faculty, and staff. So really all that you have to do is manage the global policy, the teachers, faculty, and staff policy, and then the group that the teachers, faculty, and staff policy is assigned to. That's like 3 things. Keep it simple. Don't complicate it, creating all these different policies and doing everything. Keep it very simple, and your life is going to be simple. So that's kind of my motto and things. So you're probably also wondering, wow, that's a lot of settings. We have a special documentation out here, and I will post it in the chat so that some of you guys, well, actually everybody can see it. They published it about a month and a half ago. I don't know, maybe, yeah, it was about a month and a half ago. Is keeping students safe. And so in here, they have recommendations for Teams. They're constantly updating. There's new stuff coming out every month. Sometimes it's like every week. And so trying to stay, up to date on that. I'll go over that at the end of this meeting. But just there's a lot of settings in there that are specific for student safety. And so documentation covers that. So in here, there's a link for administrators, one for educators, policy quick guide. But I'm going to show you this administrators one. So if I just scroll down, meetings, safe, set up safe calls meetings. So controls who can join meetings as a presenter by default. And so in here, it walks you through who can join meetings as presenters, because when a teacher hosts a meeting, people that join that, you can either be a presenter or an attendee. Well, you don't want to have a student joining as a presenter, because then that gives them the ability to kick the teacher out of the meeting. And you don't want the student kicking the teacher out of the meeting. You don't want that student muting other students and causing, a ruckus. So you want to make sure that only the teacher is the presenter and all the students are attendees. And so this setting will allow you to do that. The other popular one is preventing students from meeting unattended. And we call this the lobby feature, because you don't want students to join the meeting and start the meeting when the teacher's not there. Just like we would do in a physical school, where the students aren't allowed, they get off the bus in the morning, they go into class. No, you don't go into class. They wait outside the class until the teacher opens the door. And so students wait in the hallway, teacher's there, opens the door, students can get in, because you don't allow the students to run around the classroom without a teacher. So that's where this lobby is kind of that same thing in this virtualized world, where you don't allow people to in the meeting. You make all the students wait in the lobby until the teacher starts the meeting, and then the teacher allows the students into the meeting from the lobby. So the lobby is like the hallway, more or less. And then you can actually kick students out of the meeting, put them in timeout, I guess, in the lobby, and then bring them back in. So those are kind of really popular settings. Those are probably the two that I talk to customers the most, is the lobby setting and then the presenter settings. But in here, it walks you through what the settings are and why and links and everything. So this is a really great documentation to look at this for. Not only, so this was for the meetings. So this is all the meeting section. Here's for the messaging settings, and talking those or walking those through. So use this as a guide for how you should configure what your settings should be for global and for your teachers, faculty, and staff. So kind of two ways. Look at the policy packages as a guide is one. And then second, this documentation of some additional settings. Use those to figure out which settings that you want to apply to the students. So that's kind of policy assignment in general. I'm looking at a way at our questions. So I'll get to some of those later on. But back to users and settings. Let's move along here. So meetings, there's some other settings in here, some live event policies and live event settings. I'm not going to cover those. Messaging policies, we already talked about that and how to do group assignment. Teams apps, this is great. So as you guys know, one of the great things about Teams is you can add apps, and there's thousands of applications that you can add. And so when you look at the Teams, the side bar, you could pin certain applications like Planner. So set up policies, manage apps. So in here, you can actually turn off applications. So you could allow all applications. So your students and teachers and faculty can add applications, or you could turn them off, like block them all. And so you can only request them. So these are settings that you have in there to control applications. You can also pin which application. So within Teams, if you wanted to, actually, let me just go over and open the client. Let me launch the client so that I can explain this, because if I see over here on the left, oh, I messed with those policies, so it moved it. But if I wanted to pin like Planner over here, or I wanted to remove, calendar or assignments or something, you can do that within your policies that you have. So you can decide what gets pinned over here on the left-hand side within your permission policies here. So I have the global policy that controls, your certain applications that you particularly have, and you can pin those policies. So, and this one is where you can decide what your pinned applications are. So if I want to add a pinned application, I could come in here and let's say Planner is one. So if I added that, I could specify add, and Planner would be pinned. And again, this would be assigned to a particular student or a group, kind of on that, but you just created the policy and assigned it. So I think the key take home point is just you get to control that experience in the Teams client of what they see on the far left-hand side over here. Voice, I'm going to come to that a little bit later. We're going to talk about voice and telephony, analytics and reports. These are pretty cool. If you want to come in here and just look at your usage, there's some, out of the box reports in here around Teams usage, and you could pick a time frame, so last 90 days. This is my demo tenant, so I don't have a lot of usage like you would. This is me just tinkering around in here, but you get to see various information and analytics about just the usage of Teams in here. If you want to get Teams user activity, you can click on that. It provides a good overview, but really what you want as an organization is these new features that we call Teams Insights. And so that's an application that you can actually add that gives organizations insights to teams and usage and attendance and all of those particular things. It's in public preview right now. So if I come down here and I go to insights, and it's right here, but that's the application to add. I'm not going to give a demo on it. I'm just going to say, go out and give that a try. They just came preview of it. They've been adding a lot of features to it, but go out and install that one, take a look at it. We'll provide some references later on to look at that. But that's one for your IT administrators and your school administrators to understand, engagement, attendance, and usage all together. And it's very focused on education. So this is the application that you want to go out and get. So I would tinker around with that one. So moving on, assignments, I'm not going to cover that. Org-wide settings. So let me kind of collapse this down so you get to see it a little bit more. So external access and guest access. People get these confused quite heavily. So let's talk about external access first. External access just means that you're able to chat with somebody externally. So in this example, I have my my demo tenant here. If I come up and if I come into chat, I have it enabled. If I come up to the top message, I can come in here and I could search for Eric Orman. So this is my email, ericor@microsoft.com. So now you guys all know how to email me and find me. So this is my demo tenant and the user that I have here. If I want to say, I say hi, and that's actually going to pop up on my chat. It did in my other window that I'm not sharing, but it's a way of having external chat, just like you have the ability to send emails to people outside your organization. Well, that is what external access is. It's just the ability to chat with people outside your organization. So that's what that has. And you can also chat with people that have Skype, so consumer, or even Teams consumer also. So that's what external access is. Guest access is where you invite people outside of your organization into your organization as a guest, and they're able to join a team. They're able to chat directly. They're a guest member of your Azure AD. And so when you enable that, you can give those people specific permissions. These policies apply. These are, you don't assign the guest access policies. They just apply to all guests. And so just kind of talking about it, guest access and inviting people in, it gets kind of confusing. So let me just show you what I'm talking about. So I'm going to go back to Azure AD. And if I come over here to users, you'll see that in here under this user type, I've got member, oh, guest. Well, I've invited somebody that has a Gmail account, and then I invited another person that had a Gmail account, and then another person that had a Gmail account. Oh, here's somebody with a Hotmail account. So you're able to invite people so they can bring their own identity. I guess that is the key word, bring your own identity. So if they're an organization that has Office 365 or M365, you can invite them in. If they have a Microsoft account, so a consumer like a Hotmail, a msn.com, a live.com, what's the other one, outlook.com, you can invite them as a guest. And in fact, you can invite people that have Facebook accounts and Google accounts also. And so the benefit of that is they can use their native Google login when they go to Teams. So that is a great way. And to set that up, Azure Active Directory, go to external identities in this middle column here. And then you go all identity providers. And here I've set up Google as my social identity provider. So you got Google and you got Facebook. And so the great benefit of that is if somebody has their Google identity, a Gmail account or a Google for Business, or you can invite them in. And when they go to log into the web client or the desktop client, it'll actually authenticate them against their Google identity and then log them into Teams. So you get that authenticated user experience. So that's really cool. For the sake of time, I'm not going to go into that because we've got about 15 minutes left and I'm running a little bit behind. But I think the key takeaway from this is You can invite people with Google, Facebook, and how guest access works, inviting them into your organization. And those policies apply to them. So there's additional settings for guest access. So if I come in here and I go to external collaboration settings, you can control who can invite guests. So administrators and users with the guest inviter role can, members can. That would be like everybody in the organization. So if you wanted to not allow teachers or students, I would set members to no. If you want guests to invite other guests, you set that to no. Those kind of only allow admins and people with the guest inviter role to invite guests into the organization. So that's kind of key out of that. I'm going to click discard. You can also, and it's as simple as inviting a guest into it. And what that really means is if I have a team, I come over here and let's say I want to invite them to this all staff chat. And I come in here, I go manage channel, not manage channel, but come up here and I say add member. I could just simply add somebody external in here, Eric O.R. at Microsoft.com. It's going to look up that email address as a guest. And that's how you add. That's what it means by adding somebody as a guest is this way you can do it directly by simply adding them to a team. That user would get an invite that says, hey, welcome to Teams. You've been added to this team within this organization. And that will actually add the user on the back into Azure AD. Now you can also add a user here by just clicking new guest user and going through and doing an invite, but that just gets them into the tenant, doesn't add them to a team. So that's guest access. Let's close this out. Let's go back. Team settings. Now, if you don't have an identity and you don't bring them into that, so let's say your parents, the teacher wants to have a meeting, a checkup with the student for whatever reason. So we have those. I'm kind of being brain foggy as terms of where we have what we call those, but conferences, student conferences. Geez, if student conferences. So the teacher can coordinate a meeting, send the email out for the meeting. Those parents might not have a Gmail account or any of that. You don't need to invite them as a guest. They can just join anonymously. And so what that settings up here in meetings, sorry, so meeting settings. So anonymous users can join meetings. And so that just allows anybody to join a meeting. And so when they launch the Teams client, they'll be asked what their name is and they can join that meeting. So that's what anonymous users are. So that's what that setting is. So you've got anonymous users, you've got guest users, and you've got full users. So those are kind of the three types of users within the organization. Kind of coming down a little bit more, that kind of rounds out kind of generally kind of everything in the sense of what we have. What I wanted to talk about was kind of the architecture. So Teams is very integrated. I'm going to go back to my slides. Very, very integrated with other services within M365. So primarily OneDrive for Business, SharePoint, and Exchange. And so I love this graph simply because it shows just how the integration points are. So if I'm in a Teams chat and I go and I share a file with somebody, that file is going to be stored on my OneDrive for Business and shared to that particular user. So, back to that example where I pull up and I was doing a chat, if I decided to share a file, it would be stored in my OneDrive and shared with that person who's externally. That could work, or internally also. So OneDrive for Business is your personal drive. If you guys don't know, you have unlimited storage with OneDrive for Business, unlimited. So it's tiered in the sense of, or capped, not capped, that's a bad word. I think gated is probably the best word. It's gated. So by default, the setting is 1 terabyte, but you could change that to 5 terabytes in the OneDrive for Business admin portal. So once a user reaches 90% of that 5 terabytes, you can open a support ticket and have it raised to the next gate. But effectively, it's unlimited. So it's just gated in terms of that. But you have, at the end of the day, unlimited OneDrive for Business storage for your files. So meetings and calls, the data repository for where those are stored, like your voicemails and your meetings for the calendaring and all of that is stored in Exchange Online. So that is the data repository for all of that. And then same thing with your chats. Your chats are actually stored in your Exchange Online mailbox that's where the chat histories and such are stored. Now, when you create a team, two things happen. It creates this slide is kind of outdated. It says an Office 365 group. They rebranded it to M365 group, but it will create an M365 group where it'll add the users, and that's all for the permissioning. But it'll also open and create, not open, but create a SharePoint site on the back end, and that's where data and files are stored. And so you're probably wondering, well, a team, when do we use teams? Well, actually, I'm getting ahead of myself. So that's the kind of the architecture of that. It creates that M365 group for permissioning and then a SharePoint site. Kind of one of the top questions that I get is really around, well, help me understand when I would do, there's chat, because you can have a group chat with people. So if I wanted to start a group chat, I could simply just filter bird name, start a group chat, let's say Ruby, and then if I want to add in Pete, kind of from my earlier example, here I go, I'm in a group chat. So this is a gray as, hello all, I'm in a group chat. So again, this is a great ad hoc viral way of communicating. On the left-hand side, if you go to Teams, these are more rigid in the sense of, when I think of a team, I think of it like this, and this is, I came up with this idea. Think of a distribution group that has file permissioning associated with it, a file share associated with it. So if you guys are using distribution groups today, think of, I consider that like a team that also has files associated with it. In a K-12 space or classes, think of it also as a classroom. So in this example here, I've got Mr. Pete, the 4th grade class. This is a team. And so in here, Mr. Pete is the teacher, and he has these channels in here. You can have up to 300 channels, and 30 of those can be private. So here's a one-on-one channel that's private with just Ruby. That's where you can have a one-on-one private conversation with. But you can have up to 300 channels within this team. And so often people will use a tool that we call School Data Sync, and to automatically create all of the classes from your SIS. So if you're using One Roster API or whatever your SIS is, SDS School Data Sync is a connector that synchronizes Azure Active Directory with your SIS. So your SIS is where you're doing all your class rostering, and so you're creating all your classes over there. It'll synchronize with that and automatically create teams. So your teachers don't have to go and create a team and then add all of their students. It will happen automatically. Your teacher just logs in. There's all her classes, her teams. Students, all they have to do is log in. They're already members of that. And that happens all through the magic of SDS School Data Sync. Setting that School Data Sync up is free. We have a white glove service called FastTrack that will help you set up School Data Sync. And so that is free to you. You don't have to pay for it. You just need to submit a request for that. And so very, very simple. Come out to just fasttrack.microsoft.com. Oop, helps if I come out here to fasttrack.microsoft.com, click sign in and submit a request. And again, somebody will contact you from the FastTrack team and they'll work with you of help setting up School Data Sync. That's a great way of having all of your users just get automatically added to teams. That's the best and easiest way. Again, it's free to you. You just need to sign up for FastTrack and submit that request. Where were we at? Talked about that. Call quality, School Data Sync. We talked about that calling. All right, so let's talk about calling a little bit more in terms of that. So one of the most questions that I get with people that's starting to use Teams is, hey, so-and-so or is having a bad quality experience, or, they're just not experiencing Teams well, their voice is metallic, or they're constantly dropping. And so the first thing that I recommend is like, go to users and let's find the particular user. So I'm going to click on this one here, back to the user profile. It's going to load. And in here, right next to the policy tab is call history tab. And it shows you a history. So I've only done one call. Oh, looks like my example rolled off this morning. But I made a call between two people. It was a conference call, and the call audio quality was good. So if I click into this, it's going to show me that call. So there was a call between this person and Eric. There was only two people in this conference call, but you imagine like this call that we have here, we've got, quite a few different people in there. It would show all of them. And Microsoft does an analysis of the call quality. So if I click into a particular user, it's going to show various information about this. On the left-hand side is what, this person, and on the right-hand side is Microsoft Teams. So when you have a conference call, this Microsoft Teams is kind of the host or the room. You could kind of think about it, the service side. So on the left, it'll tell you what microphone. Now, if it says data isn't available, and this is why I chose this example, is because I use the web client. And with the web client, it can't collect all the data and information about this. But if we use a physical one, and I'm going to show you an example of that, it'll tell you what exactly camera they have. System, it's going to show you what system, of course. Connectivity, I was on an Ethernet connection for this, so of course I didn't have a Wi-Fi signal strength, but if I was on a Wi-Fi, it would show me the signal strength. And then network is awesome. So this call was good, but if it was rated as poor, it would actually show me where. So in here, this is the analytics to look at. So it's going to show me the average round trip time, the jitter, packet loss. These were all great connections. But if like jitter was bad, it would highlight this in red and show you, the time frame over here. And so that way you can easily identify. So just talk with your networking team and they can help you understand, well, we're seeing that, users are suffering from bad jitter, which just means the packet order of when they were received, or round trip time, and kind of how to adjust that. But this is the best way to come in and try to figure out what's going on. I mean, in today's world where all the students are remote, the teachers are remote, people don't have the best home network sometimes. They have congested Wi-Fi, or they might be in the opposite side of the house and they don't have a good Wi-Fi signal, or congestion is a really huge one. So this is a great way to come in and troubleshoot that. I was helping a school district last week. We were going through this and we were looking at some stuff, and we just identified a couple of students who just had really bad home internet. And so the feedback was, hey, look at your modem. I don't know who else is using it when you have your online classes. We noticed that they had kind of mild, like a 40 and 50% Wi-Fi signal strength. So we encouraged them to move closer to the Wi-Fi router, so that way they could have a better, stronger signal. There's a lot of data to be groomed out of this. So just showing you where to go and learn about that is kind of the point of where we had. Now that's an individual. If you want to aggregate all that data up, you can come over here to the call quality dashboard, and this will aggregate all of that data up at a very high level. So you get to see, because you may have hundreds, if not thousands of calls. And so the call quality dashboard aggregates all that up, where you get to see, how many calls are being made monthly, your daily trend, and look at it. Again, I don't have a lot of cool data, but if you go and look at your call quality dashboard, you'll have a lot of cool data in there, because again, this is just my demo tenant that I have. So I've got about 1 minute left, but I am going to go over, so hopefully you can bear with me. I'm going to quickly talk about telephony, and phone stuff. So kind of one of the more hotter things these days is that we hear about is your teachers are now at home, and they need to make calls, receive calls, and they don't want to be using their cell phone or their home phone for privacy reasons. So how do you take their desk phone or classroom phone and extend it to them? And so Teams has PSTN capabilities. So you could actually route their as long as they have a Teams client, so whether it's their web client, the mobile, a browser, iPhone or whatever, as long as it's running the Teams client, you can PSTN enable that so that they can make and receive telephone calls. And so there's 3 different ways of doing that. So of course, Teams to Teams calls are free. Like if I were to call, somebody just via Teams, that's a Teams to Teams call, that's free. But if I want to add PSTN, so there's 2 ways of doing that: calling plans or direct routing. And so what that means is if from my Teams client, I could call my cell phone. People from their cell phones can call me. In fact, anybody that has a plain old telephone can call me. So my Teams client is effectively a soft phone, but everything happens right from Teams. So calling plans, Microsoft's first-party system for calling. So Microsoft would be your telephony provider, and you really only need 2 things. You need the phone system license and a calling plan. A minute plan. So think of the license as you assign that to a user. A minute plan, those come in 4 different types of bundles. They're on the bottom of the screen. They come in 120 minute, 240, 3K, and then a 3K with international. So you purchase that bundle plan and assign it to a user. And then the last step is just assign a phone number. It's really that simple. In fact, having this set up takes less than 5 minutes to enlighten your users with full Teams telephony. So you just assign that phone system license, assign that calling plan, and then also just assign a phone number. And it's really, really simple. For the sake of time, I can't show you guys that, so I'm just going to talk about it. Now, direct routing is the other way, where if you have pretty much everyone has a PBX. Well, you can extend that PBX and integrate it with Teams. And so in order to do that, you need a session border controller. So that's something that your telephony team would know about. You got to deploy that out. You need a phone system license. And then if you want to have dynamic E911, you would have to purchase that as an additional provider on that. But just an easy way of enabling direct routing is super simple for that. So I already covered that, session border controller on that. So if you want to try calling plans, I'm going to skip through these slides because just for the sake of time, kind of went long. That's possible. So I'll send out instructions. We have a 30-day trial for 25 users for Microsoft calling plans. We can extend that out for a period of time, but it's initially 30 days. So there's a trial for Microsoft calling plans. But if you want to try direct routing, there is a partner that I recommend. Their name is NewWave. And I'm happy to introduce you to those guys. I'll include it in my email and the notes that go out. But they can start a trial with you, integrate in less than an hour. They can have things set up. But effectively what they do is it's a hosted SBC. They're like a full SaaS offering for direct routing. So you could purchase your own SBC and host it on-prem and configure it and manually do it all. Or you could go the more full service offering, and NewWave can provide not only E911 capability, but also the SBC in a hosted redundant manner. So they provide trials also, actually starting one with a very large school district in California tomorrow with NewWave. And so that is that particular piece of that. So if you guys have further questions on this, happy to answer those. Maybe that would be good for another webinar idea for that. But the last thing I want to leave you with is really around how do I keep current with Teams? There's kind of 3 things given all the changes that happen with Teams in the sense of value add that we're delivering monthly and weekly. There is a weekly digest. I covered this in my other webinar, the overview, so I'm not going to here. But from Teams specifically, Teams Engineering publishes a blog at the end of the month. It's usually I always think it's the first week of the month. That tells you, hey, this is all the stuff that we shipped last month. And then the Teams Education blog will publish all the things specific around Teams for Education. And so what that looks like, and this is the last thing that I want to leave you with, before we have open Q&A, is so I'm here at the Teams blog, and so here's the one for what's new in Teams. I'll post it to the chat. There we go. That's the Teams blog. So if I want to know about everything that was released in Teams in October, it's going to go through and detail all of those particular things. This is a great way to stay abreast of everything. But also, they just released this. So, just last week, new training resources for teams. So what I've gone over today, if you want to take that to the next level, I would start here. So in here, there's links to these learning paths, how to set up Teams meetings in your organization, how to set up direct routing, privacy, compliance, and then they're kind of role level, whether intermediate or beginner. They don't have any advanced in there, but really these are great next steps of how to get more immersed in Teams. But from today's point of view, I think just getting you guys ramped up and some of the basics, this would be your next step for that. Wow, that was just rapid fire. I'm actually done right on an hour because we started 5 minutes off. So literally that was an hour. So that kind of concludes in general my presentation. I know that there's quite a few questions in here, so I'm just going to move into the Q&A and start answering chat questions, unless any of the facilitators had anything they wanted to mute your microphone and say. Was there anything before I started going into Q&A?
No, go into the questions unless you want some help reading them off, but if you can see them, go through them.
Okay, I'll go through them. So were we offering SMS in Teams? So like text messaging? No, currently we do not have SMS capability. So be able to text people in Teams. That's not something that's currently available yet. Looking through the questions, Jay had a question around, wasn't there a feature coming to auto place attendees with a student license into the lobby? Yeah, so Jay, what you'll want to look at is that lobby setting and applying that to the teacher. So basically when a teacher creates, or an organizer, that's actually what we call it, is the meeting organizer. We're just using teacher because in this example, but when a meeting organizer, teacher, creates a meeting, only when you use the lobby and you use that present attendee, that anyone that joins that meeting before the teacher is going to wait in the lobby. And then the students will join as attendees once the teacher allows everyone. So look at those two settings, the lobby setting and the presenter setting, to answer that question.
Eric, can I ask a follow-up on that?
Yeah.
The options for the lobby that I recall are, I think the teacher wants to set that to like only me, and I know we can default that to only me. Is that what you're referring to?
Yeah. Yep. So in the portal, so if I go to, where's it at? Meetings, meeting policies. So that's the one that's automatically only organizer is in there, and then there's that one everyone.
We're struggling with that from the perspective of substitute teachers when they need to hop into
everyone a meeting. Is.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm not gonna sprinkle coat that. Yeah, everyone is trying to figure out substitute teachers. That is a difficult thing, and we really haven't cracked that, besides just make that substitute teacher, and then what we encourage is to use the Meet Now option for meetings.
Got it.
Because they won't have the ability to control that. So it's because if the primary teacher has this set to only me, so these settings here, they correspond with like if I create a calendar invite and I go schedule a new meeting and I just say require attendance. So kind of for the sake of the group, because this is pretty important. So I have this meeting scheduled. If I go meeting options right here, it's going to open this web page, And this is where you can control the per meeting settings. And so what he was talking about is who can bypass the lobby. So only me, or you have everyone, or people in my organization, or people entrusted. So if I have the only me here, and then who can present, only me. So that means that the organizer, only me, is able to present. Everyone else is going to be attendees. So this setting is who can bypass the lobby corresponds over with which one did I say? Kind of who can bypass the lobby. Yeah. Automatically admit people. I wish they would name it better, but it's really just in here, organizer at the same thing, but that's kind of how they're mapped to that. And roles that have presenter rights in meetings. So you would say everyone, or say just organizers, but users can override. So those would be your two settings here that you would default your meetings to, because you don't want to have your teachers go into every meeting and have to make sure the meeting's setting. So you just set these as the default settings. Did that answer it, Jay?
Yep. I was hoping for a little more granularity. I thought I remembered something coming on that was based on license that would detect whether you were a student or a teacher. But
I have not heard about that whatsoever. A lot of people, so these settings would apply. There's no distinguishing. So even if the teacher booked a meeting with the other teachers, that one teacher, everyone else would wait in the lobby also. But they can go and adjust the per meeting settings. These are just the defaults. Yep. So of what they had, so that teacher could come in here and say, oh yeah, no, this is a faculty meeting. I don't want to say only me. I want to say everyone. So that way everyone can simply join the meeting. So you can always override. But having that logic like you want, that would be awesome. I really wish that would be something, but make sure you go ahead and file a feedback on user voice for that. But that's not something that I have insight to that's coming.
For sure. Thank you.
So Alara Smith had a great question. Is there a way to disable students' abilities to create their own groups? So yes. So by default, everyone is allowed to create a team. So you probably don't want that, students creating a team or other people in an organization. You can lock that down. So there's some PowerShell scripts to do that. Let me just quickly show you. Prevent users creating M365 groups. And here's the documentation. It's the top one. So this follows you around. Effectively, what you're going to do is create an Azure AD group. You're going to run a PowerShell script that says only people in this group are allowed to create teams. But really, you're only allowed to create an M365 group. So here is the documentation for that. I'm going to post it in the chat to answer that particular question. Michael had a question. Can admins change settings on scheduled meetings? No, an admin can't. Only the meeting organizer can, or other presenters. Scrolling back up. I think, Michael, you had a question around what are the best practices for student global settings. I've kind of already covered that. Use the policy packages as a guideline, and then also the link that I posted in there around the student safety guides here for that. You said high ed. High ed is a little bit different than, of course, K-12. So high ed, people can self-police themselves a little bit better. So chat is most often enabled in high ed as opposed to K-12. So look at those policy packages and then look at this guide. It's kind of two good places to start. Anybody, feel free to unmute your microphone if you have other questions. I'm looking at your question, Alara. Yeah, let's follow up offline. I'm not too sure about that one. It's like it seems like you're having an error submitting feedback on that. Anybody else have any other questions?
Well, and maybe to Alara, I just copied and pasted the link from My Teams client in the bottom left corner, when you click on help and choose suggest if feature, you might be able to get in by clicking on it in your own tenant, versus me just copying and pasting the link.
Yeah, so in here is you open it up and you come down to help in the bottom left corner, and then there's suggest a feature. There's also report a problem. This is awesome. In fact, it just doesn't go into this black Ethernet hole out there. They actually look at it. In fact, I submitted a problem on Friday. I got feedback today that it was a bug that they were trying to get more data on, and I had submitted it and it had the information that they needed. And so they said, thank you. We're actually able to now fix this problem. So that was great. It was a issue about allowing people in from the lobby. It was this real transient issue. It would only happen sometimes in some situations. And so, yeah, so definitely when you guys run into problems or you hit issues, use that report a problem. And then when you have feature ideas, of course, do that suggest a feature. While I have you, I just want to show you one other additional thing. So I actually, no, I'm not going to show that. I already did that. Kind of keeping track of what I presented and what I didn't. Anybody have any other questions?
Well, maybe we'll give it. Oh, sorry, go ahead.
Oh, no, go ahead. You had a survey or something, Margie, that you wanted to post?
Yeah, well, I was going to share, if you don't mind, I'll take over this sharing for just a moment. You can have it back in a minute, but maybe while giving people a chance to think about their questions. My name is Margie Strite with Microsoft, and my role is an Education Customer Success Manager. And we are offering these trainings in partnership with OETC, but we'd really like to know what other trainings would be valuable for you. And so if you have a moment, this is just a 1-minute survey. It doesn't take very long. I'll post the link in the chat as well. If you visit aka.ms/educationWS for workshop feedback, or scan the QR code, we'd love to know which workshops would be valuable for you to attend. And we also have a branch there if you have educators that you support and you think they could value for some training. It'd be also nice to know which end user trainings would be available or valuable for them to attend. It's not working for you. Okay, I will double check and make sure it's working. Maybe I need to go move a slide on that from my end, so I'll fix that here in just a second. The other part is we do offer end user training for free to OETC members. So if you are interested in end user training, so things like Microsoft Teams for the end user, or OneDrive or other Microsoft topics, you can also email me. I'll put my email in the chat as well so you can see that. So you could email me if you have end user training needs. And then, sorry, lastly, just for some additional support, there is the Educator Community. If you're not already kind of plugged in there, that's also a helpful way to get signed up for like the newsletter. It really does give a lot of indication of new things that are coming out, kind of roadmap. So if you want to get plugged in with the Educator Community at Microsoft, you can visit aka.ms/educatorcommunity. And then if you do need other support or tutorials, we also find a lot of value from support.office.com/education. With that, I'm going to stop sharing and let Eric take back over.
Well, thank you, everyone. I think we've kind of reached the max in terms of the Q&A. You guys know how to follow up. Let me know kind of other session, or let the team know other sessions, and I'd be happy to attend and present and conduct any follow-ups as needed. But thank you for this opportunity, everyone, for coming and presenting on Teams today.